Season 17 has finally dropped, and now Solar 3.0 is the new hot topic. So what are the weapons you should be grabbing to make your solar builds as good as they can be? Well, today I'm going to run through a list of good choices for legendaries, not a comprehensive list, but a list of weapons that might help you improve your build crafting game and maximize your loadout. So for today, my goals are just to kind of point out some weapons that maybe you hadn't considered for some time, and that give them a try again. I'm going to be chilling on light GG a lot here, looking at some rolls, some perks, see what's good. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this little follow along, and keep in mind as we're talking about Solar 3.0 here, there's a lot of options to build with elemental wells. You have the explosive well maker, and you can also use the regular ones like melee well maker, which works pretty well for a lot of classes. And what I want to look at today is what weapons and what perks go well and synergize with your builds. So let's get started. Let's talk about Trustee, the Deepstone Crypt rapid fire scout rifle. I've always liked rapid fire scout rifles, and this one is no exception. So I think Trustee would be a pretty good workhorse option. Maybe going for surplus and wellspring would be good. Those work really well together. Reconstruction and misdirection could work well too. Lots of ammo doing higher damage to majors after a while. Redirection is really kind of an interesting perk that I feel like people didn't really dive into very much. Trustees is certainly an interesting one, and with Font of Might you'll be dealing more damage. It's not too hard to proc elemental wells and pick those up. So it's not going to be like a flashy grenade build type weapon, but overall a decent rapid fire scout rifle. Next up I have an SMG that one of my friends swears by, Borrowed Time. It's an aggressive solar SMG from Gambit. So unfortunately these ritual weapons have pretty big loot pools, but the good news is that focusing is a little cheaper these days. It's only 50 legendary engrams to focus one of these with Drifter. And if you can bear to get through some Gambit, it does have some pretty good rolls like Feeding Frenzy Swashbuckler, Feeding Frenzy One for All or Rampage, 4th times the Charm and Frenzy. It has a huge perk list to choose from, but it has some really good options. It even has Adrenaline Junkie, which is a perk I'm a pretty big fan of, and if you're using something like Well of Ordnance, which gives you additional grenade energy upon picking up an elemental well, that would certainly be a good option. You'd be perking that high damage a lot with this SMG. You know, you could do something like multiple Well of Ordnance mods for additional grenade energy, and then bountiful wells to proc even more each time you spawn wells. You'll be chucking a lot of grenades, and in turn you'll have a pretty high damage primary to work with. Borrowed Time is a pretty decent gun, a lot of options for you, and it can work pretty decently with your builds. And you know, while we're talking about SMGs, it's certainly worth mentioning the Callous MiniTool. That's come back with some different roles this time around. Not the best PvE rolls, if I'm being quite honest. Maybe Unrelenting and Incandescent wouldn't be too bad. Incandescent's kind of interesting because defeating a target spreads Scorch to those nearby, and that can certainly work with your Solar 3.0 fragments and aspects. I'm playing on Hunter, so I only have that kind of perspective. Warlocks and Titans maybe have more options, but that might be a decent perk on Callous MiniTool. Disruption Break is always great for the seasons that SMGs are anti-barrier, so maybe grab one of those and hang on to that. I just kind of had to throw that in there because 900 RPM SMGs I feel like are the most fun archetype, and people really seem to enjoy those, so Callous MiniTool might be worth picking up there. Let's keep it moving though and talk about some special breach load grenade launchers. Empty Vessel from Season of the Splicer. It's probably going to get a little more time in the spotlight this season. It has all the good stuff as usual, spike grenades and blinding grenades, but it has some of my favorite perk combinations as well, like auto-loading holster and vorpal weapon. If you want to go for a more ad-clear version, Feeding Frenzy multi-kill clip or Swashbuckler, even One for All would be great options. It even has Disruption Break, so a lot of choices there. But again, remember, I'm not just talking about decent weapons here. These are all solar weapons, so think of how you can use these in your builds. So Empty Vessel here has Grenadier, giving you energy back for your grenade after getting kills. That'll certainly work great. It's also going to work really well with Explosive Well Maker because obviously you're getting explosive kills, so you're going to be able to generate wells a lot easier using Empty Vessel. And similarly to Empty Vessel is Explosive Personality from Season of the Risen. Main difference here is that it's a wave frame grenade launcher, but it's still solar, and it has great options like Feeding Frenzy Disruption Break, Feeding Frenzy Golden Tricorn. That would work really well if you're generating grenades constantly with Explosive Personality and Elemental Ordnance. Then you'll be able to throw some grenades even more and proc Golden Tricorn, which is going to give you a great damage buff to your grenade launcher here. Even it has stats for all, One for All, so that's a really good, reliable option. So definitely pick up these two grenade launchers for your solar specialty slot. I think they'll work real well with Solar 3.0. Using Explosive Well Maker, you're going to be generating wells all the time, and you can either lean into health regen through that, or more grenades. Overall, pretty good picks though. Moving on, we have Cartesian Coordinate. Of course, all you probably remember this from a couple seasons ago is like the top DPS option still is good DPS for the Caretaker encounter. But of course you're going to want your Vorpal roll. The main reason you probably want to pick this up is because its Font of Might is going to lean into that. And for DPS phases, I might use Elemental Time Dilation. It is a Stasis Elemental Well perk, but it still extends the effect of Font of Might. So even if it's a solar weapon, it's still going to work. You can pick up an Elemental Well and have a damage buff into DPS for about, 13-15 seconds. So these don't drop super commonly. I think Zur still carries it, so keep an eye on him for the weekend for a decently rolled Cartesian Coordinate. Rapid Fire Fusion Rifles are pretty good for DPS right now. And next up we have Retracing Path, the Solar Trace Rifle from the 30th Anniversary Pack. I'm a really big fan of Subsistence 1 for All. It's a great way to keep the damage going. 1 for All is proccing all the time, and so is Subsistence, so you're not really reloading and you're getting a damage buff. Then if you combine that with Font of Might, you're doing upwards of 50% of your base damage. So it's kind of a fun option, and there are some seasonal challenges for, using Trace Rifles, so it's a good pick here. Trace Rifles also overall got 20% damage buffed against Majors, so they're a little bit more worthwhile your special slot that way. That was kind of a frustrating aspect before, that's been addressed a little bit. So yeah, these are a little bit more viable, and they even have overload mods. So if you don't feel like using Divinity, you can certainly use a legendary Trace Rifle to proc overload now too. So that's the majority of the ones I wanted to talk about now. I'm also going to be doing a whole nother video on exotic solar weapons you're probably going to want to be using, so keep an eye out for that. Maybe subscribe, I'd always appreciate that, it helps out the channel a lot. But before I go, got a couple honorable mentions in the heavy slot. I would definitely include Cataclysmic. That'll work great for DPS, again with Font of Might. Then you have great perks like Bait and Switch. That's going to do huge damage. It's even nice for just casual stuff like the new public event. You can down bosses really quickly with that. And then it has Vengeance as well. Aggressive frame rocket launchers got buffed, so they do the most damage out of all the archetypes. But again, it's solar, it's going to work great with stuff like Explosive Wellmaker and then Font of Might. And it has some decent DPS perks like Overflow or Autoloading Holster and that kind of stuff. So if you haven't tried Vaulted Glass, that's where you can get that. Pretty good pick. This video is already getting kind of long. I appreciate you watching. If you want to help out the channel, like I said before, you can subscribe. I always appreciate that. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more cool content. I'll catch you guys next time.